It happened at his 5th birthday party. Balloons everywhere, laughter bouncing off the walls, 100 little shoes scuffing the floor. I was refilling juice cups when he ran up, eyes sparkling, frosting on his chin. "Auntie, can you help me cut the cake?" he shouted. The room went silent. Parents turned. Kids giggled, confused. And I froze, smiling, pretending it was funny, while something inside me cracked like glass under pressure. I laughed it off, even ruffled his hair. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. But the word Auntie echoed in my head the whole day, louder than the music, sharper than the candles burning down. That night, when everyone was gone and the house was quiet, I finally asked him, "Why do you call me that?" He looked up from his toy car, innocent as sunlight, and said, "Because Mommy told me you're not my real mom." The house still smelled of cake and disappointment. The floor was sticky with juice, the sink piled high with paper plates and half-eaten slices, but all I could think about was that one word. "Auntie." I'd replayed it over and over in my mind, hoping that somehow I'd imagined it, that the noise, the music, the laughter had twisted his words. But I hadn't imagined anything. I'd seen his face, his smile, his certainty when he said it. 5 years of motherhood. Diapers, fevers, first steps, sleepless nights. And in a single second, my entire identity had been rewritten by a child who didn't even know what he was saying. When everyone left, I sat on the living room floor, surrounded by deflated balloons and crumpled wrapping paper. I kept staring at the small blue train set he'd been so excited about that morning. My fingers trembled as I traced the little silver letters on the engine. "To my favorite boy, from Mommy and Daddy." I'd signed that car myself. Mommy and Daddy. And now, I wasn't sure if either of those words still belonged to me. When he finally came downstairs in his pajamas, holding his stuffed bear, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Ethan," I said softly, "why did you call me Auntie today?" He tilted his head, the way kids do when they don't know they've broken something fragile. "Because Mommy told me," he said simply. "Mommy," I repeated, my voice catching. "I'm your mommy." He frowned. "No," he said matter-of-factly. "Your Auntie Sarah. Mommy said you take care of me when she can't." For a moment, the world stopped moving. My breath felt heavy in my chest. My pulse roared in my ears. What mommy are you talking about?" I whispered. He shrugged, already losing interest. "The one in the picture." "What picture?" He pointed toward his room upstairs. "The one Daddy keeps in his drawer." I didn't sleep that night. After Ethan fell asleep, I crept into my husband's office, a room he always kept locked, claiming he needed space for work. I knew where he kept the spare key. I'd never used it before. But that night, my hands moved before my heart could stop them. The drawer wasn't hard to find. The one under the desk, the one that stuck slightly when you pulled it open. And inside, buried under tax forms and receipts, was the photograph. A woman, young, beautiful, smiling, holding a newborn baby wrapped in a blue blanket. Ethan's blanket. And there, written in neat cursive on the back, were the words. "Ethan, 1 week old. With Mommy, December 14th. My legs went weak. I sank into the chair, staring at her face, her eyes, her hair, the curve of her smile. She looked nothing like me, but she looked exactly like Ethan. The front door creaked open just after midnight. James was home. He didn't expect to find me in his office. When he saw the photo in my hands, his expression changed instantly. Guilt first, then panic, then something like resignation. "Sarah," he started, his voice barely a whisper. "Where did you—" "Who is she?" I asked. He closed his eyes. "Please, let me explain." "Who is she, James?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Her name was Emily." Was. The past tense hit me like a blow. She was Ethan's birth mother. The room went silent. Heavy, suffocating, like the air itself refused to move. I stared at him, trying to process the words that didn't fit into any version of my life I'd ever known. "Birth mother," I repeated. "What are you talking about?" "I gave birth to Ethan." He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, Sarah, you adopted him." My entire body went cold. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not true." He stepped closer, reaching for me, but I pulled back. "You're lying," I said. "You're lying to cover something up." He took a deep breath. I wish I was. Then he told me the story, the version of it I'd somehow lived through without knowing. He said I'd been in the hospital for months, a complicated pregnancy, severe preeclampsia, the baby lost at 8 months. He said I'd been unconscious when the doctors told him. He said Emily, a close friend of his cousin's, had gone into labor the same week, terrified and alone. She didn't want the baby, he said. She couldn't keep him. And you were broken, Sarah. You couldn't face the truth. So you gave me someone else's child? I said, my voice trembling. I gave you a son, he said softly. You were so happy. You thought he was yours. I couldn't take that away. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt my throat closing, my hands shaking so violently the photo slipped from my fingers and landed on the floor. Why didn't you tell me? Because you didn't remember, he said helplessly. You were so weak. The doctors told me you had memory gaps, trauma, shock. When you woke up and asked for him, I thought maybe it was meant to be. Meant to be, I said, my voice breaking. You lied to me for 5 years. He knelt in front of me, his eyes glassy. I was trying to protect you. You were barely holding on. I didn't want to lose you too. I looked at him. This man I trusted, this man who'd watched me sing lullabies to a child I thought had my blood. And all I could see was a stranger. I buried a baby that wasn't mine. I asked quietly. He hesitated. Yes. My world tilted. He kept talking, his voice distant, muffled by the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. He told me Emily had died a year later, a car accident. He said no one came forward for Ethan, no family, no claims. You're his mother in every way that matters, he said desperately. He loves you. You love him. That's real. But love felt like a luxury I couldn't afford to believe in anymore. You took away my right to know, I whispered. You built a life on lies and called it love. Sarah, please. I stood up, my legs barely steady. I don't even know who I am anymore, I said. And before he could say another word, I walked out. That night, I drove with no destination, just empty roads and headlights slicing through the dark. Rain started to fall, soft at first, then heavier, until it felt like the sky itself was mourning with me. At a red light, I pulled over and screamed. Not out of rage, out of grief, because somewhere out there was a woman named Emily, the mother my son would never know, the woman whose face I'd seen in his smile all these years. And somewhere inside me was a truth I'd never be able to erase. I was never his real mother, but I was the only one who'd ever loved him like one. Morning came, but it didn't bring light. Just the pale gray kind of dawn that creeps in through curtains and fills a house that's too quiet. Ethan was still asleep in his room. I stood in the doorway, watching him breathe, the soft rise and fall of his little chest under the blanket with cartoon rockets. His hair fell over his forehead the same way it always did, messy, perfect. And for a second, I forgot. For a second, I was just mommy again. Then he murmured in his sleep, Auntie, don't go. The word pierced me all over again. I closed the door and leaned against the wall, feeling my knees give out. 5 years of memories. The scraped knees, the birthday songs, the whispered I love yous before bedtime. They all came flooding back, but now they looked different. Blurred, borrowed, like I'd been living someone else's life. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. James had gone to work, pretending that things could still be fixed with words. But words weren't enough. Not when my entire world had been built on lies. So I packed a small bag and drove to Willow Creek, the town where Emily had supposedly lived before she died. All I had was a name, a faded address scribbled on the back of that photograph, and a desperate need to know who she was, who my son came from. The drive took 3 hours, but it felt longer. Every mile added a new question. Who was Emily? Why did she give him up? Did she ever know what became of him? And most of all, did she ever love him? Willow Creek was small, the kind of town that smelled of coffee and old wood, where everyone knew everyone. The address led me to a weathered white house with peeling paint and a wind chime that sang softly in the breeze. A woman in her 60s answered the door. Yes. Hi, I said, forcing my voice steady. I'm looking for Emily Dawson. The woman's eyes softened, and that was when I knew she was gone. You must be from a city, she said quietly. I'm Margaret. Emily was my daughter. Her was gentle, practiced, like she'd said it too many times. Can I talk to you for a moment? I asked. She hesitated, studying me for a long second, then nodded. Come in. The house smelled like lavender and old books. On the mantel, there were photos, birthdays, school plays, laughter frozen in time. And there, tucked between them, was Emily again. Younger, freer, holding a newborn in her arms. Ethan. Margaret followed my gaze and smiled sadly. He had her eyes, didn't he? I swallowed hard. Yes, he did. We sat in the living room, sunlight spilling over the faded couch. I'm sorry if this is hard to hear, I said carefully. But I'm connected to her story. I didn't know her personally, but I recently found out that my son was her child. Margaret didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked relieved. I always wonder what happened to him, she said softly. Emily never told us where he went, just that she was giving him to a family who could love him better. My chest tightened. Better. She was only 21, Margaret continued. No job, no savings, no partner. The father disappeared when she told him she was pregnant. She tried so hard to keep him, but she was sick. Lupus. It was getting worse. When she met your husband's cousin, they arranged everything quietly. She said she didn't want him to see her die. I felt the tears before I even realized they'd fallen. She loved him, I whispered. More than anything, Margaret said. But she was scared he'd grow up watching her fade. She wanted him to have a life without hospitals. We sat there in silence for a while, two mothers bound by a child neither of us could fully claim. When I finally spoke, my voice cracked. She died when he was 1? Margaret nodded. Car accident. She'd been on her way to bring him a letter. Said she wanted him to have something from her when he was older. We never found it. The car burned too badly. I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying to hold in the sound that escaped me. Margaret reached over, gently taking my hand. You're the one raising him, aren't you? I nodded, barely able to breathe. Then you're his mother, she said firmly. Biology doesn't make you a mom. Love does. Her words should have comforted me. But instead, they broke me even more because I didn't feel like a mother anymore. I felt like a thief. When I got back to the car, I couldn't start the engine. I sat there for nearly an hour, staring at the road ahead, but seeing only memories. Ethan's first smile, his first word, the way he reached for me when he was scared. Every moment was real, but every foundation beneath, it was false. Eventually, I drove to a small park by the river. There were children everywhere, running, laughing, climbing slides. And in the middle of them all, I saw a little boy who looked just like Ethan. For a moment, my heart leapt. I wanted to run to him, to scoop him up, to hold him the way only a mother could. Then I blinked, and he wasn't Ethan. He was just another child with someone else's story. That night, I called James. He answered on the first ring. Sarah, where are you? I've been worried sick. I want to see Emily's mother, I said flatly. There was a pause. You what? I met her. She told me everything. About the lupus, the letter, how she loved Ethan enough to let him go. Sarah, I didn't want you to. I needed to know who I was, I said sharply. And who he is. He was silent for a long moment. And what did you find? That you've been lying to me for 5 years, I said quietly. But she was brave. She gave him up out of love. You kept him out of guilt. Sarah, please, you don't understand. Understand perfectly, I said. You didn't save me. You saved yourself from losing control. He exhaled shakily. So what now? I hesitated. I don't know. And for the first time since I'd met him, I heard fear in his voice. That night, I stood outside Ethan's room again. He was asleep, clutching his teddy bear, his small hand curled against his cheek. I whispered, I love you, even though I wasn't sure if I still had the right to say it. Then I sat by the door until morning, watching over him the way I always had, like love could still protect him from the truth. But I knew it couldn't, because one day he'd be old enough to ask the question I wasn't ready to answer. And when that day came, I'd have to choose between protecting him from the truth or finally setting him free from the lie. I didn't tell Ethan anything when I came back. Not that night. Not the next morning. I made him pancakes shaped like stars, brushed his hair, packed his lunch. Every small ritual I clung to as proof that I still belonged in this house. But every time he smiled, I saw her. Every time he called me mommy, I heard Auntie echoing behind it. The truth sat like a stone in my chest. Heavy, cold, waiting. James tried to pretend everything was normal. He'd kiss my cheek in the kitchen, ask about my day, offer to help with dinner, as if the right combination of gestures could erase what he'd done. But I couldn't look at him without feeling hollow. The man I'd once trusted with my life had stolen it from me, piece by piece, wrapped in good intentions and lies. 2 weeks passed before the truth came out. Not because I chose to tell it, but because life has a cruel way of choosing for you. It happened on an ordinary Wednesday. Ethan had been looking for his crayons, the ones he'd left on James's desk after drawing a family picture. He came running into the kitchen, waving the photo I thought I'd hidden at the back of a drawer. "Mommy, look," he said, beaming. "I found the other picture of me and Auntie." My heart stopped. He held up the photograph. Emily and baby Ethan, frozen in time, smiling. I dropped the dishcloth in my hand. "Where did you get that?" "From Daddy's drawer," he said innocently. "That's me, right?" I nodded slowly, my throat tightening. He tilted his head. "Who's she?" I couldn't speak. The words wouldn't come. James walked in then, freezing mid-step when he saw what Ethan was holding. "Daddy," Ethan said, turning to him. "Why didn't you tell me I had two mommies?" The silence that followed was unbearable. "Ethan," James began gently, kneeling down. "Come here, buddy." But Ethan shook his head. "You said Mommy had me at the hospital. That's what you told me when I asked where babies come from." His little brow furrowed, confusion clouding his face. "Why did you lie?" I couldn't bear it. I stepped forward, crouching down beside him. "Sweetheart," I whispered, "that woman in the picture, her name was Emily. She loved you very, very much." He blinked up at me. "So, she's my real mommy?" The word real sliced through me like a blade. "Yes," I said softly. "She's the one who gave you life." He stared at the photo again. "Then who are you?" I felt tears burning behind my eyes. "I'm the one who's been lucky enough to love you every day since." He didn't answer right away. He just looked between us, his tiny face trying to make sense of something far too big for him to understand. "Did I do something bad?" he whispered. I shook my head, pulling him into my arms. "No, baby. None of this is your fault. You did nothing wrong." He hugged me back, confused but trusting. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. He didn't care about blood. He cared about love. It was the adults who couldn't stop bleeding from old wounds. That night, after Ethan was asleep, the house finally broke. I sat on the couch, the photo on the table between us. "Do you realize what you did to him?" I asked, my voice quiet but sharp. James ran a hand over his face. "I was trying to keep us together, by keeping us in a lie." He didn't answer. "I met her mother," I said. "She told me everything. Emily didn't give him up because she didn't want him. She did it because she was dying." His eyes softened. "I know. I just didn't think you could handle it." I laughed bitterly. "You didn't think I could handle the truth? I lived 5 years in a lie. That's what I couldn't handle." He leaned forward, desperate. "Sarah, please. You're his mother. In every way that matters. You're the one he runs to when he's scared. You're the one he calls when he has nightmares." I looked up at him. "And what happens when he's old enough to ask me to rest?" "Well, you want to know why I let him call me mommy when I wasn't. What do I say then?" "You tell him you loved him," James said quietly. "I'll tell him the truth," I replied. The next morning, I packed a bag. Not for me, for Ethan. James stood in the doorway. "Where are you taking him?" "To the only place that still has a piece of who he really is," I said. "He deserves to know where he comes from." He didn't stop me. Maybe he knew he didn't have a right anymore. The drive to Willow Creek felt different this time. Lighter, but heavier too, like carrying both grief and grace at once. When we reached Margaret's house, she was tending to her garden. She looked up, surprised. Then she saw Ethan, and her face softened into something almost sacred. "Hello," she said gently, kneeling down. "You must be Ethan." He smiled shyly, clutching his toy car. "Hi." I stood behind him, heart pounding. "This is Emily's mother." He looked at me, confused. "My other grandma?" Tears filled her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. That's right." He looked between us, then did something I'll never forget. He walked up to her, held out his toy car, and said, "Mommy says you love my first mommy a lot." She took the toy with trembling hands. More than anything, we spent the afternoon there. Margaret showed him old photos. Emily is a little girl, laughing at the beach, holding her first puppy. Ethan listened with wide eyes, fascinated. When she showed him a picture of baby Emily, he grinned. She looks like me. Margaret smiled through her tears. You have her smile too. I watched from the corner of the room, feeling something inside me settle. Not peace, not yet, but understanding. He wasn't mine by blood, but maybe that didn't matter. Maybe love didn't need permission to be real. On the drive home, Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, his small hand still clutching the photo Margaret had given him, Emily holding him as a baby. I glanced at him in the mirror, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like a bridge between two worlds, two mothers, two kinds of love that both belonged to him. When we got home, James was waiting on the porch. He looked exhausted, older. Did he like it there? He asked quietly. He did, I said. He deserves to know her. He nodded slowly. And what about us? I looked at him, really looked, and realized that our story had ended the moment the truth came out. We'll raise him together, I said. But the marriage, it's over. He closed his eyes, a single tear slipping down his cheek. I guess I knew that, he whispered. That night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he asked, Mommy, can I still call you that? Even if I had another one. I swallowed hard. You can call me whatever feels right to you, baby. He thought for a moment, then smiled. Then I'll call you my mommy. I brushed the hair from his forehead and kissed him goodnight. And as he drifted to sleep, I realized I didn't need to be his real mother. I just needed to be the one who stayed. Months passed. Seasons shifted quietly around us, the world moving on even when my heart still carried the echo of that day. Ethan adjusted faster than I did. Children have this strange, beautiful resilience. They accept truth without bitterness because they haven't yet learned to fear it. He still called me mommy, sometimes my mommy like he had that night. And every time he did, the word felt different. Not a title borrowed or stolen, but one rebuilt from honesty. James moved into a small apartment across town. We kept things peaceful for Ethan's sake. Birthdays, school plays, weekend visits. The kind of quiet co-parenting that happens when two people finally stop pretending they can fix what's already burned. Some nights, after Ethan fell asleep, I'd sit in his room and watch him breathe, tracing his silhouette against the faint light from the hallway. He was hers, but he was mine too, in every way that mattered. And maybe I thought that was enough. One rainy afternoon, about 6 months later, I got a call from Margaret. Her voice trembled with something between excitement and disbelief. Sarah, I found something. What do you mean? I asked. In the attic, I was cleaning out Emily's old boxes and found an envelope. It's addressed to Ethan, but it's sealed. The date on it, it's from the week she died. My breath caught. The letter? Yes, she said softly. The one she was going to deliver that night. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence between us. Can I bring it to you? She asked. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Please. She arrived 2 days later. Ethan was at school, so it was just the two of us. Margaret held out the envelope. Yellowed with age, the edges frayed, Emily's handwriting still elegant and certain. On the front, in blue ink, it said, For my son, when he's old enough to understand. I traced the letters with my fingers, feeling the weight of it. She wanted to have it, Margaret said quietly. But I think maybe it's meant for you too. I nodded slowly. Would you like to stay while I read it? She smiled faintly. No, I think that moment belongs to you and her. When she left, the house was so still I could hear the ticking of the clock in the kitchen. I sat by the window, broke the seal, and unfolded the letter. My sweet boy, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay long enough to see you grow. And that breaks me, even from wherever I am now. I want you to know something before the world tells you its version of who you are. You are not unwanted. You are not a mistake. You are my greatest gift, the piece of me that proved love can exist even in broken places. If another woman is raising you now, love her. Don't ever feel torn between us. If she holds you when you cry, if she teaches you how to dream, then she is part of my love too. Because I didn't give you away, Ethan. I gave you forward. To a life bigger than my illness, to a future stronger than my body. and to someone who would love you for me when I couldn't. So, when you call her mommy, know that somewhere I'm smiling. With all my love, forever. Your first mommy, Emily. The ink had faded slightly, but every word hit like a heartbeat. Gentle, steady, real. By the time I finished reading, I was crying so hard the paper trembled in my hands. Not from sorrow this time, but from something deeper, something that felt like forgiveness. Because in that letter, she hadn't just spoken to him. She'd spoken to me. She'd given me permission to stop feeling like an imposter. She'd given me her son, fully, finally, without shadows between us. When Ethan came home from school that day, he found me sitting on the couch with the envelope beside me. "Hey, Mommy," he said, dropping his backpack. "Why are you crying?" I smiled through the tears. "Because someone wrote you a letter a long time ago. Someone who loved you very much." He climbed onto my lap, curious. "Ooh." I handed him the paper carefully. "Your first mommy, Emily." His little fingers unfolded it clumsily. His reading was still slow, the way 5-year-olds read, sounding out words, pausing, whispering questions. When he got to the part that said, "If she holds you when you cry, love her for me," he looked up, eyes wide. "That's you," he said softly. I nodded, tears spilling over again. "Yes, sweetheart. That's me." He smiled, the kind of smile that seemed too wise for his age, and wrapped his arms around my neck. "I think she'd like you," he whispered. And for the first time, I believed it. That night, after I put him to bed, I stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the earth still smelled like new beginnings. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, Emily." Somewhere in the quiet night, I felt something, not a sound, not a presence, but a peace that sank into me like warmth after a long winter. It wasn't about who had given birth or who had raised him. It was about love that had somehow stretched between two mothers across years, across grief, and still managed to meet in the middle. And that middle was Ethan. A year later, I took him back to Willow Creek the first time since that day. He held a bunch of wildflowers we'd picked together, white lilies and baby's breath. We placed them on a small headstone that read, "Emily Dawson, 1995 to 2020. A mother's love never ends." Ethan knelt, tracing the letters carefully. "She's sleeping, right?" I nodded. "Yes, but she can still hear you." He smiled softly. "Then I'll tell her thank you for letting me have two mommies." And just like that, something inside me healed completely. That night, as we drove home, Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, clutching the letter and the photo of Emily. I glanced at him through the mirror, the road stretching endlessly ahead, the setting sun painting the sky in gold and rose. He was her child. He was my child. He was ours. And for the first time since that birthday party, I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. Not because I'd found the truth, but because I'd finally learned to live with it. Because love doesn't need a bloodline to be real. It just needs a heart brave enough to stay.